Hi, I'm John Gross, a colleague of Dr. Waller. Today, we're going to start from the very beginning with SPSS. This video is designed for those who have no prior experience using SPSS and possibly little experience with statistics. So we'll take everything step by step. We'll focus on creating variables and setting up your data in this video. So let's dive in. The first thing you'll do is open up your SPSS package after downloading it onto your computer. First, SPSS stands for Statistical Package for the Social Sciences, but it's used in many fields beyond the social sciences. SPSS helps us organize and analyze data. So if you've ever worked with a spreadsheet like Excel, SPSS will look very familiar to that, but it's designed specifically for running statistical analyses. So after you open it up, the first thing you'll do is close out of this splash box. And when you view it, you will see it looks very much like a spreadsheet. And then you'll notice two tabs at the bottom of your screen. So right down here, you'll have data view and variable view. Data view is where you'll enter the actual numbers or data. Each row represents one participant or one case. Variable view, this is where you'll set up and define what each of those columns, these columns, in data view, what that represents. And so this is where we'll start. All right, so once again, there's two views, data view and variable view. I'm down here at the bottom. Variable view is where we'll set up the variables. And data view is where you'll see those variables represented for each participant or case. The columns are your variables, and then the rows are your participants or your cases. So let's just click right down here on variable view, bottom of the screen. And in variable view, each row represents a variable, and each column defines some kind of property of that variable. All right, so we're going to create 4 variables today based on a data set that we'll be working with in future videos. So we'll be working with ID, gender, height, and weight. So let's go through how to set up each of those variables. The name column is where you'll give your variable a short, simple name. For ID, let's just type ID. This will serve as the unique identifier for each participant. In our next variable, for gender, let's type gender. For our next variable, height, let's type height. And for our last 4th variable, weight, let's simply type weight. So we have named 4 individual variables: ID, gender, height, and weight. You'll notice that it kind of auto-fills with these properties of those variables. And we'll look at a couple of them. Most of them default to something that we will use typically. But for important things, we will discuss it in this video. The type tells SPSS what kind of data you'll enter. The default is numeric, which is perfect for ID, gender, height, and weight, since we're entering numbers for all of these. For ID and gender, we'll set the decimals to 0. As these variables will be whole numbers. For height and weight, we'll set the decimals to 1. Since we might need to include decimal values like 65.5 inches or 150.7 pounds. In the label column, we'll add a more descriptive name for each variable. This helps us remember what each variable represents when we look at the output. For ID, let's type participant ID. For gender, we can type gender. For height, we can say height in inches. And for weight, type weight in pounds. Now, let's talk about the measure column. This column is important because it tells SPSS how to treat the data. And there are 3 options here. Nominal, you'll use this category where the order doesn't matter. Like gender, we'll assign numbers to males and females later. Scale, we'll use this for continuous data, like height and weight. So let's set ID and gender as nominal variables. So I'm going to go to ID. I don't have to click on that. I just want to highlight for you. I'm going to go to ID and to measure, and I'm going to set ID to a nominal scale. I'll also do the same for gender. And then we'll set height and weight as scale because they represent continuous measurable data. Please excuse my cat. Before we move on, let's just quickly review the 4 scales of measurement you might come across in statistics. And this will help you understand how SPSS combines them into 3 categories. And understanding these scales will help you know how to categorize your variables in SPSS. So just really quick as a refresher, nominal, this is for categorical data that has no meaningful order. It's just labels or names. An example might be gender, male or female, eye color, brown, blue, or green. In SPSS, nominal data is often coded using numbers, which we'll do in our next part of this video. But these numbers don't imply any rank, right? There's no meaningful order. Ordinal data, on the other hand, this is used for ordered categories where order does matter, but the exact difference between the categories aren't measurable. Like a satisfaction level, satisfied, neutral, unsatisfied. Well, how satisfied or unsatisfied were they? We don't know. Or ranks in a race, first, second, third, right? Well, it doesn't really tell us how far in first place was compared to second. In SPSS, ordinal data can be assigned numbers to reflect the order, but the differences between the numbers aren't consistent. Interval data is numerical and has equal intervals between values, but no true 0 point. And that means that 0 doesn't indicate the absence of the property being measured. An example of that might be degrees in Celsius or Fahrenheit or IQ scores, right? Because a 0 on a temperature scale doesn't necessarily mean that the absence of at least in Fahrenheit, it doesn't mean the absence of heat. So the 0 doesn't really represent a true 0. And the last one, ratio, this is like interval data, but it has a true 0 point, meaning 0 represents the absence of the property. And you can meaningfully multiply and divide ratio data. Examples of that are height, weight, age, income. And in SPSS, ratio data is also treated as continuous, and you can calculate averages, differences, and other operations. Now, SPSS does simplify that into 3 categories. So nominal is for any categorical data where the order doesn't matter, like gender or nationality. Ordinal is for ordered categories, like ranking or satisfaction levels. And then, so there's ordinal. And then finally, scale combines interval and ratio data into this one category. And this is used for all continuous data, like height, weight, or age, where the numbers have true meaning and can be averaged and compared. Now that you have a better understanding of the scales of measurement and how they fit into SPSS, we're ready to move on to the next part of the video. And in part 2, we'll enter the data in data view. And you can see that our variables are there. And so we'll enter the data in the next part and get into how to code the data. So stick around and I'll see you in part 2.